this now. CEO of Tech Pole Gwen Ngwenya says policy should not focus on race. Ngwenya spoke about the demerits of race at an event in Namibia. Now she says discriminatory attitudes are deeply embedded and are hard to shake. Ngwenya also says some policies fail to benefit those they are created for. Well, Gwen Ngwenya joins us from our Cape Town studios now. Ms. Ngwenya, thank you very much for your time. So, key to your argument at this event you attended in Namibia is the system of meritocracy, and you're saying that competence and not colour is what is important and is what essentially should encourage policymakers to focus on. But the question for you is how realistic, or whether this system would work in a country like South Africa, where we have years of inequality that have been based on race.
Well, the speech is quite a long one, so I would encourage, if people are able to try and look it up online and read it. I won't be able to cover all its substantive points here. But the essential point that I make about merit is that it's uncontroversial for most people to say that we should strive for excellence and we should try at all times to hire the best candidate, especially, I would say, not just in the private sector, but especially in the public sector, where actually incompetence hurts the poor most. It's really those frontline services where you actually want the best people in the position. I do say that the challenge with meritocracy that we must address, it's not a kind of blind faith in meritocracy. The challenge with meritocracy is the fact that people with resources are usually in the best position to display their merit. So if you look at all the way from how university selection and even at school happens, if we look at things like academic performance, extracurricular activity, letters of recommendation, it's quite clear that those with resources are able to get access to the best tutors, they're able to engage in extracurricular activity, and they have a social network from which they can get good letters of recommendations. So we mustn't pretend as though it is everyone has the same ability to be able to display their merit when they do have it. So we must be as concerned about ensuring that people have the kind of opportunities, a sound education, etc., the right opportunities to be given a chance to display their merit. So that is a very important part of the merit argument. But also the speech makes a couple of arguments about race as well, which I can get into.
Yeah, I wanted for us to try and avoid this becoming an academic exercise and perhaps use a living example. Let's take, for example, Magazole Mampimpi. He is the Springbok player who's now become the first South African to score a try in a Rugby World Cup. Now, his rise to the top is something of a miracle had he not been seen or spotted by scouters on the field. What chance would a player like that have stood had this system of meritocracy been in place, given, or keep in mind, the whole issue of inequality in our country?
Well, he would have stood a good chance. I mean, as I say, the whole focus of the speech that I gave was that we must select people based on, on their merits. We must strive for excellence, but we must be conscious that everyone is given an opportunity to display the talents that they have and for those talents to be nurtured. So absolutely, I would encourage, I mean, I'm not an expert on rugby per se and how they recruit and nurture young talent, but if that involves going around the country into areas where that kind of talent is likely to go unnoticed, I think that's absolutely what we should be doing in many more areas, ensuring that from very early on people get an opportunity to develop the skills and innate abilities that they have. But once we get to critical positions, this was particularly a talk to the Economic Association of Namibia, so if you're looking at the workplace and how hires should be made, I'm saying that at that point we should be looking to hire the best. And if we're still saying at that point, well, unfortunately we can't hire the best because some people didn't go to good schools, I would say, well, it's that then you need to address. You need to ensure that people are getting a quality of education in which you then can assess them in terms of their ability and in terms of their performance.
Yeah. Gwen, let me use this opportunity perhaps as a last question to you. As someone who headed the DA's policy unit, Musa Maimane coming out yesterday for the very first time after his departure, stating that he possibly, although he's not saying it outright, but he possibly could form a new entity. Would you join him?
No, most definitely not.
Why not?
Well, I mean, you know, the entire policy platform that I would have presented as the head of policy was not one in which Musi Maimane and I saw eye to eye, particularly on this issue around whether or not it is necessary to use race in addressing disadvantage. Whereas I've always argued that there are very credible policies focused on actual disadvantage that we can use to address issues such as education, poverty, spatial inequality, etc., without the use of race, which wherever race-based policy has been implemented, if you look at what happens even in Namibia, what happens in Malaysia, we see that really it creates an elite crony class within that historically disadvantaged racial groups. So race-based policies have not worked anywhere where they've been implemented, where I can see, and I don't think South Africa is set to be any different.
All right, Gwen Ngwenya,
so it's not because the ANC has failed to implement race-based policies, it's that race-based policies are a failure.
All right. Gwen Ngwenya, thank you very much for your time. She is CEO of Tech Pole.